This video has been sponsored by .emu. Hello and welcome to Pharaoh, a New Era. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick introduction about the game itself. I'm going to compare this remake with the classic original, point out where the differences in the features are, and in the third part, I'm going to give you my personal review about what I think about this remake in particular. So, timestamps are down below. Let's get started with the introduction of this game. So, Pharaoh is a deep and complex city builder staging in the ancient Egypt. So every city you will build here is focused around that culture. The gameplay itself is mission-based, so most of the time you will have a certain win condition that you're working towards to. So here, for example, is 2,000 people and a couple of other stats. And if you don't like that too much, you can go into the sandbox mode, which is its own kind of beast. So there are sandbox maps and mission maps. You can play this as you want to. There is a deep campaign, which features over 50 missions. The game has the base game and the Cleopatra DLC or add-on. Back in the day, these were add-ons included. So there's a lot of meat on the bone on this game to begin with. So in its core, the gameplay loop is always the same. You have to build a city on a specific map that has certain challenges and certain features. So I want to talk about the gameplay loop, and then we're going to go on over what you're going to do. So the wonderful thing about this game is it's very complex, but easy to pick up. So in the center, you have to bring up population, because that's the backbone of every city. So you issue some housing areas, people will migrate over the road into the city, and then you have citizens. To improve the houses, leveling up the houses is a big part of the game. You will have to provide certain things for them. At first, they just want water. So you go on over to the services, you either build wells or water suppliers, and then you have water. Wonderful. So that's the most basic thing covered. Then your people get hungry, so they need food. So you head on over to the food industry. On this map, I can only hunt or do trade. You can do farming and food processing, and there's lots of different things to fulfill that need depending on the map you're at. So once that's covered, your people will need more than that. Always more than that. So they will then start and need some goods, and then luxury goods. So we're starting to gather some clay at the water and produce pottery out of that. Or since we don't have clay, we have to import the clay from our neighbors. So trade is also a big part in the game. So there's always a couple of cities that you can trade with that sell some stuff and buy some stuff from your map. It's always a pretty well thought through balance between things. So to give you an insight about this map, so here we got copper and gold in abundance, but we don't have food. So we mine out that stuff, export the metal, and import the food. Every city is different in that regard. Sometimes you will be having almost no metal and you're selling all the food to import metal. This makes it always a different and pleasant thing. So industries in this game are all over the place. So you have potteries, you make papyrus out of reeds, you make weapons out of the copper. There's lots of different things, but it's always the same procedure. You gather something, you have a processing building then, and then you store it at a storage yard, and then you distribute it either to a place that it needs, like here for example my fortresses want the weapons, or if I'd be hunting and the granaries stuff is going to transport the food to the bazaar is transporting the food back to the cities. So as you see there, logistics play a big role as well. Then we have, of course, culture, because what would be an ancient Egyptian society without culture? So there's now an entire entertainment menu. So you have to bring up different schools of entertainers, and you can set up different places where they can play. And the most interesting part about that is certain buildings, they not only have placement rules in regards of grassland or stones and not. Some buildings want a certain road form to be built around. So for example, this festival square can only be built on a crossroad. This makes city design so interesting and diverse because, for example, every sort of cultural entertainers has to be built on a different type of road. So the pavilion has to be built on a crossroad, and this one has to be built in a curve of a street. Lots of goodies. Culture is fun because it's different. Then we got, of course, religion, because what would be ancient Egypt without religion? So you have to take care of the whims of the gods as well. So you have a overseer of the temples. So you build temples to make the gods happier. Sometimes you have to make more gods than just one happy, so you have to balance out to have enough temples. If the gods are unhappy, they will punish your city. If they are happy, they will bless your city. So there's another moving part that you have to take care of. And then there's, of course, all manner of other services. So healthcare, fire protection, crime fighting, tax collection. So the game has so many different parts. The wonderful thing about it is they work all similar enough to each other that you quickly understand how they work, but there's so many things that before you know what's happening, there will be a fire in your mining district because you were distracted because the gods were displeased again and you had to build a temple. And it's really brilliant because it feels like, yeah, what should go wrong here? It's super easy, but before you know what's happening, you will be in a hectic situation that is exerting pressure without any feeling of imminent loss. Because in this game, the wonderful thing is if you're doing your job too bad, people will just leave your city. And you're only losing the game if you run out of money. So once you're minus 5,000 coins, you're done. So as long as you get a certain income, you can always experiment with solutions and bounce back from catastrophes. So there's never the feeling that you just destroyed yourself because you just made one bad decision early on. No, there's really lots of things that you can bounce back from. So I haven't covered all the parts of the game so far. There's military too. But I think you get the idea already what the game's revolving around. Of course, one last thing that I want to point out, because this is a city builder about the ancient Egypt, we get to build pyramids and the like as well. These are mega projects called monuments, which require you to import certain goods for them, and they are huge building sites. You will have to build guilds of craftsmen for that, huge projects, and they often are the pinnacle of a certain story mission. So that pretty much sums up almost everything about the game. I haven't talked about the fact that logistics play a big role here too. So you have to balance out where the warehouses are, what the warehouses accept and don't accept. So you can do a lot of different things with the game to get some sort of control over it. So I think you have a good picture about what the game's all about. This is a tiny city so far. We don't even have 1,000 people. To give you an impression, the late game missions want you to have 15,000 or 20,000 people. So you will ultimately use the majority of this map when you're playing larger cities and more challenging scenarios. Okay, so that's the basic gameplay in a quick wrap-up. I hope that was helpful for you. So now let's go on over and compare this version to the classic version. So, I mean, it's quite obvious the game's graphics have been overhauled. There's high resolution graphics everywhere, and apart from that, it stayed very close to the original. Gameplay wise, there are almost no changes whatsoever. We have pleasant visual upgrades here. When we click people, they still drop a pleasant little line about their everyday being. This game took a lot of care to make sure that it still feels a lot like the original, but we got a lot of goodies that I want to talk about as well. So the building menu has been overhauled in a way that every building is accessible via 2 clicks. While it is a little bit hard to keep track of all the buildings when you're new to it, because there's just so many of them, as soon as you get used to it, it is really easily accessible, and due to the fact that in the old version, like you only had like 1/3 of the you only had 2/3 of the screen for the map, and 1/3 was all menus. And here we have a much more streamlined user interface that I personally find very, very pleasant. So the other thing that I want to point out here is if you hold down left control and left click something, you can pick up and copy buildings. So this is a very nice quality of life thing of games nowadays that is just Yeah, I like to have such things. Another thing worth mentioning, when you place down a building, you see that green and that red point. These are entrance and exit points of the people of that building. In Pharaoh, people often walk around. For example, entertainers, they start to take a stroll over the citizens district, and this way you have more control over it. That's really, really cool, because sometimes, for example, when you place down something right next to a roadblock, wonderful situation. So roadblocks, they tell your people to not cross a certain line. And as you see here, this wouldn't work because one of the spots is inside the roadblock area and one is outside. This would not work. And in the old version, you were not able to see that. And you could have worked around with the double roadblock configuration. So this way the game will take care that it's always on one side. But these little things, they make it a little bit more accessible. We have a nilometer, which will show you how much flooding will happen. When on this map, I don't have agriculture, but you would see how these things work. This is a new little tool. Nothing too groundbreaking, but it's nice to have. And we also have a improvement on the dock trading, so you can now tell docks what kind of goods they should accept and which not. And the whole worker system has been a little bit overhauled. So right now, when you place down a new building in the current version, so I'll place down a hunting lodge. So right now there's no workers. There's now recruiters spawning, and they will go around until they find somebody to work here. If you don't like this kind of system, and this goes for a lot of things, you go on over to the options and you can change the new gameplay things that have been implemented back to the old ones. So if you don't like any of these things that are added into the game, here we can change it so they don't use the recruiters anymore. And here also the workers, the amount of free workers. Back in the old version, you had to mouse over your palace. Now you can mouse over your population to see how much unemployment and how many workers you got. Right now, the game is simulating a age, well, how to put it, only a couple of people in your society can work, you know, between 20 and 49 years, and if they are too old, and so on. You can keep that age simulation on, but you can also just have a fixed worker ratio, so 40% of the population is always available for work. This one is a little bit more fluid, whereas this one is more plannable. So as you see there, there's lots of other things that I don't want to cover too much in detail. The changes are not too big, and if you don't like them, you can easily just disable them. This is something I really, really do like. So apart from that, there are not too many things that are too different. We got the overlays that we had in the old game, so you have all these different ways of managing your needs and all these things. It's all there and easier accessible, in my opinion at least. But altogether, there are not too many changes to the original version, which is something I like. But there's one thing, well, I'm going to go on over to part 3 with that one into the review, because I want to talk about that there as well. So my personal impression about this, we're starting with the positives first. So this game is a really, really well made rework or remaster, reboot, however you want to call it. It catches the original flair, and my wife and me, we were sitting here and playing the original Pharaoh together with this version, so we had a really good impression about that. And the summary is, it is just a souped up version of the old game. So if you have missed the train back then, and you were always like, man, this game looks interesting, but the old version is just not playable for me, because admittedly I think like the old version available on other platforms hasn't aged too well. It's low resolution, it's clunky, and lots of other things, and this here is just the same old game in a new environment, and I love it. It's really cool that there are no really big changes that you have to live with. If any of the changes are displeasing, you can disable them. The maps are really the same compared to the old missions, so this is a really well made this is a really good example of how to make a remake that is drawing in players that have never played it before and making old school fans happy at the same time. Well done. There's only one gripe, and I personally find it a bigger gripe. Where is the minimap? Like, the old version had a minimap and this one hasn't. I don't know why. I think partially I felt like, yeah, we see much more of the screen now, so the minimap isn't all that necessary anymore. Like I said, the old version had 1/3 of the screen blocked with user interface stuff. And here we have a much more streamlined presentation, but I really would like to see a minimap implementation, be it optional and any further patch. That I think that could be doable, but that's really seriously the only thing I felt like, man, that could have done better. And that's a good thing. I mean, I'm quite a critical person, and I'm German, so I can complain about practically everything. But jokes aside, I really like this rework, and I can't wait to get back into gaming it because it's fun. It's a masterpiece. It always has been, and this reboot here makes it way more accessible for everybody, showing off that a game 20 years old can be so darn well made that it stands up to the competition of modern games with ease. This game is, as a matter of fact, a lot more compelling and fun than many modern games that I've played before. So total recommendation from my side. Both thumbs up, well made. I can only recommend it. It's a lot of fun. The only situation you wouldn't want to have it is when you already played the game in the early 2000s and you're definitely done with it and you're like, nah, I don't want to go back to there. So, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave me your comments down below. Let me know how you think about this game, how you think about this remaster. And I'd be really appreciating any thumbs up on that video. Consider subscribing to my channel. I really would appreciate a bell thing as well, because, you know, that way you stay informed whenever I publish new stuff. And of course, thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. I hope to see you soon again and have a wonderful day.